This is a Geek Leader podcast, and I'm your host, John Rauda. This show is all about helping us grow as leaders, become better technologists, and improve our lives both at work and at home. I hope you enjoy the show and learn a lot. Welcome to a Geek Leader podcast. I'm your host, John Rauda. And if you could, please do me a favor and take a moment and leave a rating and review in whatever podcast player you're listening to this on, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, doesn't matter. I would greatly appreciate it. And that feedback really helps get other listeners to the show. Also, if you're not subscribed, go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And if you feel so inclined, you can go to geekleader.com/tip and donate to the show. Thanks so much. All right, Geek Leaders. Today I'm honored to have Nick Jonsson on the show. He is the author of a book called Executive Loneliness, which we're going to talk about. He's a coach, a TEDx speaker, lots of cool things. And we're going to get into some of the important stuff and some of the things that people don't really like to talk about sometimes, about what we as leaders sometimes struggle with and executives struggle with. So anyway, with all that being said, Nick, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and I'm grateful to be here to talk about, indeed, a topic that many people are avoiding, loneliness.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something we don't always like to talk about, but it's really important to talk about it. Before we get started, tell me a little bit about your career, how you got into coaching and executive leadership and things like that.
Yes, I was born in Sweden and then educated in Australia, and then I spent the last 22 years in Southeast Asia, working my way up the corporate ladder over a decade, having great packages, roles, only to find myself falling all the way down through a burnout, divorce, resigning from the job, losing myself and tumbling around until I spent another decade now to sort of rebuild myself and find myself. So that's sort of what got me into the work I did, that really questioning myself, everything that was so painful for me. I thought, well, now I've gone through it. Let's see if I can be useful for someone else so they don't have to go through the same.
Yeah. I think that's really important. So when you talk about, kind of getting to the point in your career, you seem like you were on a very upward trajectory with, your executive role, and then all of a sudden it all kind of crashed down on you. Do you ever think back about what you could have done differently to prevent that? Or are you just grateful that it actually happened because it puts you in a different realm, a different path?
Yeah, it's a very interesting reflection, John. And I mean, looking back at it, what was it that happened? Well, it was multiple factors. For once, I was in the biggest role I ever been in my life at the time.
Mhm.
I was a general manager of a company managing medical services in Indonesia. So we had 72 hospitals and clinics under my management. So quite stressful job, big responsibility and so on. So while I had all the perks I ever dreamt of and so on, and everything looked very good on the outside, on the inside at that time, I had insecurities. And reflecting on that, it was really that I wasn't, vulnerable. I didn't ask for help when I needed it. Instead, I felt, well, I now have my nice big corner office, my car, my driver, I have everything of this. So I should have the answers. So therefore, I sort of just worked harder, I worked longer, and I tried to solve everything myself. And that is what really caused this loneliness. And I just went deeper and deeper into like this kind of hole where I didn't speak, I didn't ask for help until, after a year having been in that space, it was too much. And then I basically burnt out from that.
Yeah, I can definitely see that being an easy path to get into, being in leadership for many years. A lot of times when you get to that level where, you have a lot fewer peers because you're kind of higher up in the organization, and, you feel like sometimes there's nobody you can confide in. There's nobody you can talk to. And for me, I found that it's important to, not only to have a spouse or, a family that you can share with, but also like coaches, counselors, all those people are also there for you too. What is your take on that?
Yeah, so at that time, looking back at it, I was given mentors. I was given people who were ahead of me in the organization in different countries and regions and so on. And I remember getting on these calls with them, but instead of being vulnerable, instead of opening up and saying where I have challenges and difficulties, I tried to impress them because I also knew that these are the people who actually will sign under my bonus payment, my next promotions, and all of these things. So I didn't want to show them many weaknesses. And it worked. I got big payouts, I got the promotions, and it just kept on working like that. And perhaps that's an issue in the corporate world, that if we are forward thinking, we're impressing the bosses and so on, that's what they see, right? So if we show some insecurities, and then if they have to pick the next one to be promoted, and they have 5 options, they're gonna pick the one who's most confident, and who clearly want the role and is hungry for it, as opposed to someone perhaps who's showing some weaknesses. So that's the game I played, and it worked for me until it worked against me, basically.
Yeah, no, I totally see that. I think that's why it's important sometimes to get mentors or be a part of a community that's outside of your company that doesn't affect those promotions and doesn't affect that. Like one of the examples is I'm a member of the Charlotte CIO organization. You know, and part of being in there, you get to talk to other CIOs and executives that are kind of dealing with sometimes the same stuff that you are. But it doesn't matter about your vulnerability with them because they're not going to affect your your job or your promotion right now. So you have that freedom, I guess, to be vulnerable. So I think that's an important thing to have too. Um,
Yeah, absolutely, John. And I wish I knew that. I wish we had this conversation a decade ago when I was sliding down. It didn't cross my mind at that time. I guess I was in a at one end I was maybe delusional, because I had earned it all. I had a salary, I had everything. So I was overconfident on one hand, but on the other side, I didn't ask for help for the things that I needed. And I wish I was approached by some external coaches at the time, and so on. And I think the last decade it's become more common also around the world, not only in the US. I was in Jakarta, Indonesia at the time, and I was not approached by any coaches. So I didn't really consider that as an option. These days, yeah, I'm a big fan of having safe spaces outside our work. As you rightly said, we can be anonymous and we can do it on a one-on-one level, but we can also do it in peer groups and masterminds and so on. And that's what I learned, and that's what I'm advocating for now.
I think that's fantastic, and I definitely think we have to advocate for that more and more because you're right. A lot of people are afraid to ask for help, and sometimes you don't even know that you need to ask for help. Did you ever have that part where you didn't even realize like that I'm struggling with this until it kind of snuck up on you?
Absolutely. And during that time when I went through that challenging phase, not only did I speak to mentors or coaches about my challenges, the work related challenges, I didn't address them, but to deal with all my emotions and insecurities here, should I resign? What should I do? And all of those kind of thoughts, instead of talking about them, I went to the bar after work, and what
Mm.
started as, 3 beers after work, catching up with friends, sometimes it ended up being half a dozen before it became a dozen, and it just became too much. And I started to, do less exercise, eating more. I gained about 60 pounds at the time, and alcohol had at that time become something I was addicted to, and I was in full blown denial about it. In fact, our office, or the office I worked in, we were actually lending our meeting room to one of the recovery programs for alcoholics. And I remember walking past that meeting room, seeing the sign that they had a meeting a couple of times a week. And I remember thinking, poor buggers who cannot handle the alcohol. And there I was walking to the bar myself to drink to calm down after work. So I was obviously in complete denial about it. And I didn't realize it until later on also that it really had become a problem for me.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, alcohol can totally do that for you, and it's really it's crazy how like it's one of those things that you can kind of slowly slip into. You think of it as just a stress relief after work. I'm going to grab a drink with some friends, and then all of a sudden there's no friends there. You're having a drink by yourself, and next thing you know, it gets further and further down that path. One of the things that I heard you talk about before is how like when you changed, you lost a lot of weight. You got more active. You started exercising and running and getting more into activity. How has physical fitness helped you in your mental side of things?
Yeah, it has really helped me. So from when I was going down, when we spoke about me being in the job and resigning, I was sliding down for 2 3 years, losing my health and fitness, and then coming back up, it was really foundational. I had lost all my fitness. It was just coming back to walking and very slowly cycling. But now it's a big part of my life. I do something every day. I believe that, I know that you have this book called Born to Run, and that can be quite painful to run every day. But I believe that we are born to move. We got to move somehow, even if that's hiking, walking, swimming, cycling, running, yoga, whatever we love to do should be something that we like to do. And I believe we need to include something of that in everyday's life. At least when we are so connected with our digital devices today, we need a way to discipline ourselves to reconnect and leave the devices behind.
Yeah, I agree 100%. We just got back from our family got back from a trip to Switzerland where we hiked pretty much every day for, 2 weeks. And it was just, so refreshing to be out there without a phone, without, any kind of technology, and just seeing nature and walking and, putting on the miles. And, we really had a good time doing that. But one thing that I've taken back into my work life is when I'm doing one-on-ones with my employees, is I do walking one-on-ones, with as many as I can. And, being out in nature and doing a walking one-on-one where you're walking for about a mile, we have this nice little loop around the office that we can go out and kind of go for a walk and be outside. Um, and, getting a little bit of exercise here and there just makes a huge difference in the conversations that you're having with people. And also, I think for that mental clarity, I know when it rains here and we may have like, a week worth of raining and I don't get to go outside and have those walks, like I can just feel myself getting more depressed and, feeling sad. It's just an amazing part that how that little bit of physical activity seems to be better than drugs.
I'm completely aligned with you. And I know that many of my mentors I have these days, they offer morning talks, and they even set up, you can book me in my calendar. I go in for a walk in my park, and that's a good opportunity to, catch me at 7:30 in the morning. I walk around the park. That's what my mentors do. And I try to join them on some of those talks as well. And I do it as well, even with my coaching clients. Sometimes we have some of the sessions in a botanic garden. If I'm visiting Singapore, we might have the session there and go for a walk and then end with a coffee after.
I think that's great. Yeah, I think that's fantastic. Um, so tell me a little bit about kind of how your life has changed, after you've become more vulnerable, you started to share and communicate and then get your health in order. And, how is your life different now and than it was, on your, before you had, I guess, your fall from grace when you were having your improvement up? How is it different now?
Yeah, it is different in a sense that I was forced to surrender my old way of thinking, and I would say that while alcohol was certainly a major issue in it, it was also what saved me, because in the end, having been drinking too much for 3 years, I realized eventually that I cannot drink anymore because I'm becoming so sick of it that I had to seek for help. And that was the saver. So that brought me then to these recovery groups, and it was inside these groups I started to feel safe to speak up. Once I owned it that I was now having an alcohol problem, I realized that I wasn't the only one with this. I came in these recovery meetings and listening to others who've gone through similar challenges as me. So once I owned that and I asked for help for that, then I realized, wow, if this worked for my alcohol addiction, and in fact, I can share that as I walked out of one of those recovery meetings in May 2018, I've not had one alcoholic drink
Wow.
since. So thank you, touch wood.
Congratulations.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so and what I can say is what happened then was, well, the urge to drink was lifted because I replaced it with human connection. I was drinking on my issues. I didn't just drink for a social fun or a celebration or something. I drank on my issues. So when I could talk about my issues, the urge to drink was lifted. So I just keep these days having these honest conversations about when I'm facing something that is not pleasant. I think, who can I have a conversation with about this? And that is instead my go-to these days. And so that's how my life is different. And I apply this to all areas of my life. If it worked for my alcohol, now I'm remarried because also my last relationship went down the drain with my crash as well. I'm happily married now for 8 years, and it works wonderfully because I'm not holding back. I'm sharing how I feel, and I'm open in that. It also worked for everything else in my life as I'm more vulnerable and open.
So let me ask you this. For people that are struggling to share how they feel or to share what they're dealing with, a lot of times they're struggling because of fear. Um, what advice would you have to someone who's fearful of opening up?
Yeah, I think first we need to be careful of not oversharing. I know there's a lot of talk about vulnerability, and it's not sexy to come into the office and spray out over all your colleagues all the shit that has happened on the weekend and all the drama and personal things that someone might have gone through. That's not what we're talking about here. It's about finding a couple of safe spaces. And as we discussed earlier, it might not be anyone in the office that we feel safe with.
Yeah.
But we can be curious. Is there someone I can have a coffee or lunch with at work and talk about work-related challenges there, and maybe step by step build up some trust? But outside our office, then, do we have someone in our family? Do we have a friend, a close one or two friends we can share something with? Or maybe they can be an old boss, someone we worked with before, someone who's more senior, who might understand what we're going through. We can talk to about it. And then also our partner. Can we build up the trust with, if we have a partner and we are in a relationship, that we are there for one another when we go through tough times. So I think those are the places. And if we still say, I really don't know anyone, then there are coaches, there are therapists, there are counselors, there's all these people who can help. And then I just want to say also, there's also the 12-step programs, which are full of volunteers, and they are, run by all these people who's been there before. There's groups for alcohol, drugs, sex addiction, porn addiction. There's even for gambling, gaming. You even have now 12-step programs if you run your company bankrupt. You have even a program if you go in personal bankruptcy. And that's perhaps when people think about jumping out the window because they don't know how to talk about it. There's now groups for people who's been there. And I would say, then go on Google or go into any AI and ask which is the closest office that they have this issue. Give them a call, and there will be people taking those calls. I used to have the hotline for alcoholics myself, so I've been on those calls in 3 weeks at the go and taking these calls, and people love to hear from anyone who has some challenges there.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I think it's fantastic to find your group, find who you can share with and who you can talk to, and don't be afraid to share. One of the things you've shared publicly before is about you had a friend who committed suicide that you kind of didn't know about, that they were struggling because they didn't open up and share. Um, I imagine that a lot of us have people like that too. How do we encourage people to? How do we become a welcoming person that someone can come and share with us, to us?
Yeah, so indeed, I lost a friend in 2019 to suicide. So at this time, I was 1 year into my recovery. So it was 1 year since I was coming back to life. And at that time, yes, I had my safe spaces, but it was more the 12-step program, my wife, a couple of close friends and family members who I'd been vulnerable with. But the bigger circle they didn't know yet. I still kept it secret. But as I lost my friend to suicide, that changed everything because I had met him just a few days ago before it happened. And we were working on a couple of projects together. And I remember when he died that I was angry at myself. Why didn't I ask him what was going through in his life? Why didn't I share with him that I gone through something difficult that might have made him feel safe to share what he was going through? Because I had no idea. In fact, on his social media, he had just come back from Mount Everest base camp, and I had actually joined his Facebook group. That was what they did at that time, and you donated money and so on. And he seemed to be in a really good spot, and he just shared pictures of him and his girlfriend on Facebook, saying that he's never been happier. So it was a big shock and a big surprise, and to deal with that in that shock, I called up a suicide hotline and became a volunteer and fundraiser. I set up a fund to raise money for this cause, then for suicide prevention. And then I did something that would change my life forever. I made a video where I shared about a little bit about my journey, the cause, and losing my friend Simon. I posted this on LinkedIn, went out for a jog, and I came back to my computer, and this clip had gone viral. So with that, my story was all out there on the internet. The cause was there, and I had received invites from journalists to be on radio, on TV, and they wanted to interview me for newspaper and magazines. So within 24 hours, this was a known case, and I could no longer hide. So while it was quite shocking and scary at the time, it was what I needed, because that's why I can be with you here today, John, and talk openly about this.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. I think a lot of us have had stories, that we can relate to similar to that. Like I had a fraternity brother, who we actually started a business together for a while and until we sold out, and he committed suicide as well. And I had talked to him probably, 2 weeks beforehand, where he actually sent me his resume and asked me if I'd, review it for him because he was looking for a new job. And I talked to him. He sounded, just happy and fun and like nothing was wrong. And then, you get the call that, he passed away, and, just shocking. But when things like that happen, it's a surprise, and you do feel that guilt and that anger of like, I could have done something, or maybe I should have done something more. Why didn't I see that they were struggling? And for me, I had to kind of just step back and say, it's not my fault that I didn't see it. I tried to be there, but going forward, I'm just going to try to be there more. you know,
Mm.
and that's all I can do. I can't blame myself for someone else's, um, depression, I guess. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I came to that conclusion as well. And all I can do is to move forward and to, lend an ear to people who are going through tough time. And if someone is listening today, John, I just want to say what I always say. And I know you will share my details later. I'm offering everyone who's a human a call to connect and share. So if someone is going through a tough time, and it doesn't matter what it is, it might be that someone for themselves also drinking on the emotions and so on, then that's my space. I mean, I've been there and I managed to sort that out, and now enjoying my life in sobriety. And I say that that's my goal. That was my challenge, and I know how to get through that. Someone else might go through something else, and that's when we can give back, right? And that's what creates meaning, and that's my purpose today, to help others to go through the challenges that I found myself in. And instead of spending 3 years going down, someone can reach out and maybe have a quicker rebound.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Hopefully that's really going to be helpful. And that's, one of the things that I really liked about your book is that, you talk about executive loneliness, that there is a loneliness there, but there's a way out of it. And I think that's kind of one of the exciting points that we want to make sure we hit on and to help people out. So how can people, get out of that loneliness behavior that they're in right now?
Yeah, so I mean, the opposite of loneliness is connection. So, how do we
Mhm.
find connection? Well, before we find connection with other people, we need to go inwards. We need to sort ourselves first out. And typically, that needs to happen most often in a one on one environment. So, that's what I do now as a coach and a therapist, to work with someone one on one, for them to really talk through what's happening in their life in a safe environment, to reflect on that and address that and start to forgive ourselves and move forward, reduce the stigma and shame and so on. And once someone is comfortable with a one-on-one discussion, then the next phase is, can we be in a group of people? And while I was fortunate in my recovery, I say fortunate because that's how I found a group of, problem drinkers. And many people will ask me, but what about if I don't have a alcohol problem? What about if I don't have any of the other addictions? What should I do then? And I say, great. Well, but what tribe should you find then? And that's what I created now also, John. I'm running a men's group, and it's for everyone, for executives, and we talk about life. The next call we will have will be about finding white space time in our busy calendars. How can we disconnect from the devices? How can we, find some time, like yourself, to go out hiking or whatever it may be, to make sure that we do that on a regular basis as part of self-care. So in that sense, it's about finding our tribes, finding our communities where we can talk as humans and help each other.
Yeah, no, I think that's fantastic. And I think that's great that you're doing that for people. So how is it that people can connect with you online, pick up a copy of your book, learn more about executive loneliness and how to, connect with others that they can share and, get this cure for loneliness?
Yeah, so they can find me on my website. It's nickjonsson.com. Also, when it comes to my book, Executive Loneliness, it's on Amazon, it's on Audible, it's an audiobook, and it's also on Wikipedia. Anyone who go to Wikipedia and search on executive loneliness will find my book there, and a lot of the research that I've done on the topic. And I can just say, why executive loneliness then? Well, we all have heard the term, it's lonely at the top. So we know the
Yes.
boss is lonely. But what I found when I did the research, they can be lonely anywhere in the organization. If we
Mm.
don't feel safe to speak up, if we don't feel that we can ask for help, then it's not only the boss who can be lonely, it can be lonely everywhere. So that was my finding. And the way out then is, talk to someone first, even if it's one person you can trust, and open up about your feelings and what are the challenges that you're facing, and get some support on them.
It just reminded me of one more question that I really wanted to ask you. Do you think with AI today infiltrating everything we do, that's affecting our loneliness more or less, or how do you think that's affecting people?
It depends how you use AI. If you use AI to replace a human, let's say that you have a challenge, let's say that you have an alcohol problem, and you start using AI as your therapist, as your coach, and so on, you're not considering talking to another person, then I think it can be challenging. Then it might isolate us more, and it might even put us down a rabbit hole, because many times the AI will tell you the things that maybe you want to hear, but it might not be what you need to hear. So that can be dangerous. But if you use AI to find support for it, so again, if you have a problem with alcohol, if you use it to ask, I have this challenge with alcohol, what would be a good community that I can join in my neighborhood to get some support and meet like-minded? What would be the hotline to call if I need help right now about this? What would be the medical services I can call because I cannot stop drinking myself? I need a detox. What are the emergency services in my neighborhood? Or who would be a sober coach I can call, or a therapist who specializes in addictions? I need to talk to someone. If you use it in that manner, then I believe it's a great tool. So I think it's up to us to really be thinking first, what do we use it for? I think it can be negative if using it in the wrong way.
Yeah, I think I agree with you 100%. I think one of the things that comes about when you talk to people and you have that interactions is our brains release chemicals of serotonin and oxytocin, which help combat depression. And that doesn't happen when you type to a computer or talk to an AI bot. It's that physical conversation that happens when you're in the same room as somebody and you're having those face-to-face conversations. So I think that's an important aspect to be aware of. But you're right. I think if you use it the right way to find those connections, it's great. If you replace the connections, then that's where you have the problem.
Absolutely aligned.
Yeah, I think that's great. Nick, thanks so much for coming on the show. I'm gonna make sure I put the links to your website, your LinkedIn, your book, everything in the show notes at geekleader.com, so people can go there and click through. Again, thanks so much for coming on the show. Thank you for writing your book, and I appreciate all you're doing.
Thank you, John.
Hope you enjoyed the show. Please go to geekleader.com to learn more about what this guest is up to, click on their links, and connect with them online. I would also greatly appreciate it if you could leave me a rating and review in Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to the show. Make sure you've subscribed if you haven't already. And if you feel so inclined, you can leave me a tip by going to geekleader.com/tip.